The Frisian Kingdom, also known as Magna Frisia, is a modern name for the Frisian Empire in the period when it was at its largest. This empire was ruled by kings and emerged in the mid-7th century and probably ended with the Battle of the Bourne in 734 when the Frisians were defeated by the Frankish Empire. It lay mainly in what is now the Netherlands and, according to some 19th-century authors, extended from the Zwin near Bruges in Belgium to the Weser in Germany. The centre of power was the city of Utrecht. In medieval writings, the region is designated by the Latin term Frisia. There is a dispute among historians about the extent of this realm. There is no documentary evidence for the existence of a permanent central authority. Possibly Frisia consisted of multiple petty kingdoms, which transformed in time of war to a unit to resist invading powers, and then headed an elected leader, the primus inter pares. It is possible that Redbad established an administrative unit. Among the Frisians at that time there was no feudal system. Pre-migration period. The ancient Frisi were living in the low-lying region between the Zuiderzee and the River Ems. In the Germanic pre-migration period, the Frisi and the related Chaucer, Saxons, and Angles inhabited the continental European coast from the Zuiderzee to South Jutland. All of these peoples shared a common material culture, and so cannot be defined archaeologically. What little is known of the Frisi and their kings is provided by a few Roman accounts about two Frisian kings visiting Rome in the 1st century, Malarix and Viritus. By 400 AD, the Frisi abandoned the land and disappeared from archaeological records. Migration period. During the migration period, new Frisians resettled in the north and the west of the Low Countries. The Frisians consisted of tribes with loose bonds, centered on warbands but without great power. In the second half of the 7th century, the Frisian kingship reached its maximum geographic development. Social classes. The earliest Frisian records name 4 social classes, the Ethelings and Freilings, who together made up the Free Frisians, who might bring suit at court, and the Latined or Litan with the slaves, who were absorbed into the Latin during the early Middle Ages. As slavery was not so much formally abolished, as evaporated, the Laton were tenants of lands they did not own and might be tied to it in the manner of serfs, but in later times might buy their freedom. History of wars. The exact title of the Frisian rulers depends on the source. Frankish sources tend to call them dukes, other sources often call them kings. Only 3 Frisian rulers are named in written sources. Algizel. Under the rule of the king Algizel, the Frisians came in conflict with the Frankish mayor of the palace Ebroin, over the old Roman border fortifications. Algizel could keep the Franks at a distance with his army. In 678 he welcomed the English bishop Wilfrid, who, like him, was not a friend of the Franks. Redbad. Under Redbad, the tide turned in favor of the Franks. In 690 the Franks were victorious in the Battle of Dorestad under the Austrasian mayor of the palace, Pepin of Herstal. Though not all the consequences of this battle are clear, Dorestad became Frankish again, as did the castles of Utrecht and Vechten. It is presumed that the influence of the Franks now reached from south of the Outer Rhine to the coast. But this is not entirely clear because the influence of the Frisians over the central river area was not entirely lost. In any case, there was a Catholic Church mission to pagan Frisia with a monastery and episcopal see in Utrecht from 695, founded for Willibrord, and a marriage was arranged between Grimwald the Younger, the oldest son of Pepin, and Theidsbind, the daughter of Redbad, in 711. After Pepin died, in 714, Redbad took advantage of the battle for succession in Francia and regained southern Frisia. He made a treaty with the Neustrasian mayor of the palace, Ragenfried, so that in 716 his armies could enter the Frankish land as far as Cologne, where they were victorious in the Battle of Cologne. The army returned to the north with a large war loot. Redbad made plans to invade Francia for the second time and mobilized a large army. But before he could do this he fell ill and died in the autumn of 719. It is not certain who the successor of Redbad was. It is believed that there were troubles with the succession, because the Frankish opponent Charles Martel could easily invade Frisia and subjugate the land. The resistance was so weak that Charles Martel not only annexed Frisia Cyteria, but he also crossed the Rhine and annexed, farther, Frisia, to the banks of the river Vlie. Popo. In 733 Charles Martel sent an army against the Frisians. The Frisian army was pushed back to Eastiger. The next year the Battle of the Bourne took place. Charles ferried an army across the Ilmira with a fleet that enabled him to sail up to the Bourne. The Frisians were defeated in the ensuing battle, and the King Popo was killed. The victors began plundering and burning heathen sanctuaries. Charles Martel returned with much loot, and broke the power of the Frisian kings for good. After the Frankish conquest, after the Battle of the Bourne in 734, the Franks annexed the Frisian lands between the Vlie and the Laurawers. They conquered the area east of the Laurawers in 785, when Charlemagne defeated Widukind. The Carolingians laid Frisia under the rule of Gruin, a title that has been loosely related to count in its early sense of governor, rather than feudal overlord. The Lex Frisianum, the law code of the Frisians, was recorded in Latin during the reign of Charlemagne. Before 1101, sources talk about counts ruling over Frisia, west of the Vlie as Frisian counts. But in this year Count Floris II is mentioned as Florentius comes to Holland. Holland is probably Old Dutch for Holtland, literally, woodland, describing the district around Dordrecht, the nucleus of the county of Holland. The counts generally kept to this single title until 1291, when Floris V, Count of Holland, decided to call himself Count of Holland and Zeeland, Lord of Friesland. This title was also used after Holland was united with Hainaut, Bavaria, Straubing, and the Duchy of Burgundy. The titles eventually lost their importance, and the last count, Philip II of Spain, only mentioned them halfway through his long list of titles.